strategy is multi-vector. Our the so-called strategy is one vector because Russia has put the emphasis on bilateral relations, on the relations with the individual member states in European Union. The growing ideological and political confrontation between Russia and European Union prompted Angela Merkel a year ago to talk about peaceful coexistence between Russia and European Union. Emotionally, such statements cannot but provoke kind of rejection, very deep dissatisfaction, since after 30 years of post-bipolar evolution, we have come back to the old days. However, in the context of the rapid degradation of our relations and the threat of a big war in Europe, this policy of peaceful coexistence no longer seems absurd. Let me remind you that the goal of peaceful coexistence was to prevent a military conflict between Russia and the West through compromise, through dialogue. And in the current situation, it's not the worst option. I think that it is Germany who could contribute to the formation of this new strategy, given the past experience of Egon Bahr and Willy Brandt. Maria, do I have time?
Yeah, 4 minutes.
How? 4
minutes.
And now about Germany and European Union. All the two most likely coalitions, Jamaica traffic light, present themselves as firmly pro-European. But as we know, the devil is in the detail. And it's not enough to see that the future leadership in Germany will be pro-European. It is necessary to explain what Germany's pro-EU position means in practice. This is not an idle question, judging by the posture of the previous coalition government. It's not clear whether a new coalition government will have a strategic vision of what it wants to achieve in Europe. Here we can see a kind of paradox. Merkel has traditionally been viewed as the most pro-EU politician in Europe, while her government has lost the image as a consistent supporter of European federalism. Aside from this, difficult coalition negotiations between three parties will necessarily produce complex compromises and therefore a less clear signal to Brussels. Let me say a few words about the Franco-German duo, because it's still the motor of European integration. And its future, in my view, looks very iffy, not because of the future negotiations on the coalition government in Germany, not because of the upcoming presidential election in France, but because, first and foremost, because the German tradition of federalism, one of the foundations of the ideology of European unity, has been fading away. And today it looks that France and Germany have swapped places in tandem. I don't have time to speculate on this issue, but you know this better than I do, that unfortunately Germany is getting more and more intergovernmental, while France, the Macron France, unlike the Gaullist France, is getting more and more federalist. So the main question is whether these two leading countries will find a common ground in Europe. I think that without solidarity among the EU member states, let alone in tandem, it will be unrealistic to build a really strong and autonomous European Union. The split of the EU is the absence of a well-working tandem will make this common dream irrevocably lost. So my final words will be a quote from the Chinese strategist and philosopher who said, strategy without tactics is a very slow path to victory. Tactics without strategy is a chaos before defeat. So let us avoid this, this option. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Your point are very persuasive. And let me introduce our second speaker, Dr. Sebina Fischer, Senior Fellow of SWP, Stiftung Wissenschaft und Politik.
Thank you very much. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much, Maria. Thank you very much for the invitation. I think it's great to be with you, and I think this seminar is really a great initiative. I hope that you do that on a regular basis on various topics, because I think this debate among young researchers is particularly important. So I look very much forward to it. I suggested to speak about Germany and Russia in their common and contested neighborhood, because in this very important relationship in Europe, the neighborhood is one of the factors that led to complications over the past 10 years. I mean, we all know that German-Russian relations have become much more complicated over the past decade. And this is an important factor, so I think it should play a role in a discussion like this. So what I would like to do in my 8 to 10 minutes is first very briefly speak about Germany's policy towards the neighborhood, and I'm indeed taking a more German perspective here, and I look forward to then getting reactions from our Russian participants, and also to speak a little bit about how it collides with Russia's approach in the region. Then secondly, take a quick look back and talk a little bit about how Germany's policy towards the region has evolved over time. And thirdly, some reflections to conclude about the extent to which this policy really is linked to Angela Merkel as a person, and what is going to happen now that her departure from the chancellery here in Berlin is imminent. So first, Germany's policy in what we from Berlin and also from Brussels and other EU member states call the EU's Eastern neighborhood. So if you look at the goals of this policy, I think they can be summarized as support for stability, democratic transition where possible, rule of law, economic development, prosperity and peace. And as such, these aims, these goals coincide with those of the European Union's Eastern Partnership, which also provides the most important framework, if you like, for Berlin's approach to the region. I mean, obviously, due to its particularly political but also economic weight, Germany is a very important interlocutor and partner, particularly for the countries that in the neighborhood that now have association agreements. As you know, these are Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia. At the same time, successive German governments have not supported the most ambitious goals of those countries, namely accession to both the European Union and NATO. And also Germany pursues economic interests in the region, and as you all know, they sometimes do coincide with the interests of the neighboring countries, and sometimes they don't. And one example for a lack of coincidence specifically with Ukraine's interest is Nord Stream 2, the pipeline project with Russia, but I'm sure Kirsten will talk about this in the section about energy. So what are the main points of conflict between Berlin and Moscow with a view to this common and contested neighborhood? I would see 2 points. One is sovereignty and territorial integrity, of the neighbors, which from Berlin's perspective, Russia violates regularly and systematically, thinking of Ukraine, Georgia, and Moldova. And then also there are, of course, differences, divergences with a view to pro-democracy movements in those countries, which Germany sees as genuine, as emerging from within the respective societies, and Russia considers staged and instigated from outside those countries, specifically from the West. And of course, the most recent example of this is the development in Belarus since August last year. So these are the main points of conflict between Moscow and Berlin over the common neighborhood. Now, if you look at that brings me to my second point. If you look at the past 30 years, actually, you will see that the neighborhood, the post-Soviet countries between the European Union and Russia's borders did not always have such a prominent place in German thinking about Eastern Europe. So if you like, German policy has moved from an approach that almost exclusively focused on Russia in the 1990s to a much more nuanced and granulated view and approach towards the region as a whole. And there are several factors responsible for that. First of all, of course, the EU's Big Bang enlargement in 2004, when the post-Soviet states indeed became neighbors of the European Union and also of Germany. And of course, the new EU member states, Poland, the Baltic states, and others started to shape foreign policy debates inside the European Union also. So if you like, since 2004, what we have seen is a Europeanization of German policy towards Russia, towards the other countries in the post-Soviet space through these processes. Second point here is that the Eastern neighbors themselves pursued a very active and proactive policy towards the European Union, also towards Germany. So they too, by taking certain positions like, the desire to Europeanize, also the accession claims, etc., started to influence German policies, but also, of course, the policies of other member states. And then the third point here is that the instability in the region also has influenced Germany's perspective and approach. The increasing tensions with Russia, if you look back, for instance, to the Russian-Georgian War in 2008, at the time, many policy decision makers in Berlin, I mean, the war happened, and then many decision makers in Berlin really wanted to get back to normal as quickly as possible after the August War. And this process, for instance, was no longer possible, or this return to normalcy, if you like, was no longer possible after the beginning of the Russian-Ukrainian conflict in 2014. So you see that the approach changed, the perception and the perspectives changed, and so the German approach towards the region. So all this led to a review of German policy approaches towards the Eastern neighborhood, and the region as such became more important in and by itself, and also increasingly became seen as an integral part of Germany's policy towards Russia. So we have, if you like, we have a change of positions here. In the 1990s, Germany had a very strong and focused Russia first approach. And then afterwards, in the 2 decades that followed, the Eastern neighborhood became more and more important and significant also in Germany's Russia policy. What will happen now? I agree with Nadia. I don't expect significant changes. I see a lot of continuity, including because the parties of the Democratic Center, CDU, Social Democrats, Liberal Party, so FDP and the Greens, have more or less all embraced the changes of perspective that I've just described. Russia, the Eastern neighborhood, will always remain a controversial topic in German politics. But at the same time, if there are divisions, they don't run between the parties, they run within the parties. And we have a general, I would say, change of perception that really affects the political center as a whole. And the only parties that promote, if you like, a traditional realpolitik, Russia first approach are the left party, Die Linke, and the Alternative for Germany. And they won't be in government, and they both have lost voters. So this is the situation that we have now, and we can assume that the next German government will continue many of the elements that shape Germany's policy towards the Eastern neighborhood and Russia today. At the same time, of course,
sorry, you have 1 minute left.
Yeah, and I'm almost finished. Merkel was a key figure in the past years, both for the neighborhood, but also for the contact and the interaction with Russia before 2014 and also after 2014, which was a big rupture, as we all know. So automatically, her departure will have an impact, and it remains to be seen to what extent the next German chancellor and the next German government will be able to fill those shoes. It won't be exactly easy. I think Maria mentioned at the beginning that fewer and fewer young politicians in Germany actually have an interest in Russia and in the region as a whole. And this is very true. This is something that I think concerns all German experts in this Zoom room, because we really have this exodus from the German Bundestag. So yeah, it remains to be seen to what extent the region will remain a top priority also for German policy in the future. And this is where I end. Thank you very much for your attention.
Allow me to thank you for such an interesting report. And we have our 8 minutes for the discussion and for the questions from the participants. So may I use my position as a moderator and to start with question? I have a question to the professor. You have mentioned Ukraine, so I suppose you should also speak about it a little bit. So I have a question about so-called Steinmeier formula. Its signing was seen as a breakthrough, as a progress in the implementation of Minsk agreement, but at the end, no significant changes have taken place. So I was wondering, can we consider Steinmeier formula to be dead, or can we expect for a breakthrough, for a progress, something like that?
Yeah, I'm afraid I can be very quick on that. I mean, my assessment is that we won't see a breakthrough in the Donbass negotiations, be it the trilateral contact group in Minsk or the Normandy 4 anytime soon. And unfortunately, neither the German nor the French election next year will have an impact on that. And this, I think, is mainly due to the fact that the positions of the parties to the conflict, also Russia, are so entrenched that I really don't see any progress at the moment. I think the structure of the conflict, that comes on top of it. I mean, I think the structure of the conflict has changed again over the past 2-3 years, including through the passportization of nearly 600,000 inhabitants of the disputed territories in the Donbass, which is, of course, a big problem and which stands in the way of the implementation of the political provisions of the Minsk agreement. So, unfortunately, my assessment of the situation there is rather pessimistic.
Thank you very much. So we have also a little bit time for the question from the participants. Thank you very much.
Sorry, but I think Nadezhda also wanted to comment on this. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Excuse me.
Thank you. I have a very short question to our German friends. Speaking about Ukraine, don't you think that the West as a whole and European Union has, and first and foremost, European Union has catastrophically underestimated the overthrow of Yanukovych after the reached compromise? Don't you think that it was a real trigger of the tragic events after that? Thank you.
Do you want me to respond directly? Yeah. I'm not 100% sure what exactly you're referring to when you say Yanukovych's role. So, I mean, maybe we could discuss that another time in more depth, or you want to explain right now, whatever you prefer.
You remember that the EU Ministers of International Affairs and Putin's representative Vladimir Lukin, they reached kind of agreement that Yanukovych would stay till the fall and then he will step down. And this agreement was violated by the Maidan decision. And European Union accepted in a very easy going way this fact, and I think that it had a very strong impact on Russia's perception of future cooperation with European Union on the Ukraine conflict. I think that it was, in a certain sense, it was a turning point. We reached a compromise, and all of a sudden it was violated.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, none of us were present at the presidential palace in Kiev during that night, which, I mean, I think, you know, this is one of the historic events that will be interpreted differently probably until the end of time. I mean, I think the agreement was violated, including also because Yanukovych chose to leave the country, and he didn't stick to his end of the bargain either. So, and all that resulted in an extremely tumultuous situation. And I think that both sides, I mean, clearly the European Union followed some misconceptions during the Maidan, and mistakes were made. But I think the same is true for the Russian side. And I mean, the big misconception that I always see on the Russian side when it comes to events like this, and specifically again, and with catastrophic results, in my view, with regard to the events in Belarus last year after the presidential elections, is the total underestimation and lack of appreciation of movements that come from within the societies. You know, I mean, neither the Euromaidan in Kiev nor the revolution after the presidential election in Belarus last year was organized by Western forces. These are genuine societal movements, and they address deficiencies in those countries. And this is something that the Russian side, in my view, chronically misinterprets, and from this follow policy mistakes that are unfortunately irreparable in many ways. So, I mean, I totally agree with you. There were misconceptions on both sides. And unfortunately now, after 7 years of the crisis in Ukraine, the EU and Russia are even less capable of working on those mistakes and on their catastrophic implications for the sake of the affected societies. And this is really a huge problem.
Thank you, and we should go, because of time, we should go to the second section, limits and capacities for Russian-German relations after the Bundestag election. And our first speaker is Dr. Fedor Basov, senior researcher, ИМЭМО.
Thank you very much, Maria. So in the last 20 years, the German party political system is undergoing a transformation. German traditional 2.5 party system is gradually eroding. As the last elections showed, the system is now moving not towards to the 1.5 party system, but towards a simple multi-party system. This is a good point for democracy, for the Institute of Representation, and for political competition. The revival of the SPD is also a good point for Germany and the EU. The pluralization of the representation was clearly manifested in the territorial aspect as well. Regional and sub-regional political differences in Germany are growing. The new Bundestag became younger. That will be also important for determining the political course. The results of election are explained by two major factors. At first, the factor of personality. Olaf Scholz did not have any anti-ratings. Secondly, in the situation of increasing financial stratification and the actualization of problem with real estate prices in bigger cities, the pre-election program of Social Democrats favorably differed from the general thesis of the CDU-CSU about the competitiveness of an industrial state in the world. Foreign policy wasn't the central topic of the election campaign and will not be the main topic of coalition negotiations. The trend of transatlantic relations over the past 15-20 years is that their importance, especially in the field of security and defense, is decreasing, and it will continue for the next legislature. Regardless of who becomes the chancellor, the main tasks facing the FRG, primarily economic and technological, can only be realized together with the EU. And the development of European integration and the reform of the EU are of particular importance for Olaf Scholz. In the next legislature, the autonomy of the EU and its power in the world politics and economy will increase. The main goal for the German government in international affairs will be the development of the economic and technological strength of Germany and the EU. The policy towards Russia will not undergo major changes. The younger generation in German politics is not interested in Russia and relation with it. The new generation does not consider Russia as a part of Europe and also understands the risk and stagnation in the post-Soviet space as all. The continuity of the political course in the eastern direction is ensured by domestic and foreign political factors. Through internal political factors, interest groups, public administration, and the coalitional nature of the government. 3 foreign policy factors: the interests of ensuring stability in the post-Soviet space, the absence of real instrument for transformation, the political process on this space, as well as a focus on strengthening the European Union itself. The pipeline Nord Stream 2 has been completed and has serious support groups within Germany, and also meets the country's strategic development goals. Russia's influence in Central Asia to maintain stability is perceived positively in Germany. The political line regarding sanctions in Donbass remains the same. Well, thank you.
Thank you very much, Fedor. And I would like to invite our second speaker, Dr. Stefan Meister, Head of Program, International Order and Democracy, DGAP, Deutsche Gesellschaft für Auswärtige Politik.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. I just want to thank you for setting this up and giving us this opportunity for an exchange. And I also hope to be next time in Moscow to meet. I think this makes these discussions more interactive. Also, it's easier to come in and to discuss. I want to look on the structural challenges in the German-Russian relations, and a little bit maybe provocative, also analyze why we are where we are and why I'm afraid of it's not getting better soon in the relationship. So my main thesis is, and I think this is just the repetition of what has been said in the first with the first speakers, no matter who will create a new coalition in Germany after the election, there will be no major changes in the German-Russian relations. And this is due to the structural differences in the German-Russian relations, which have been growing in the last years. Russia and Germany have turned away from each other, particularly since Vladimir Putin returned to presidency in 2012 and the annexation of Crimea and the war in Donbass in 2014. Since then, every year we reached a new low in the bilateral relations. Also with the new federal government, the situation will not change. And as I said, it might even worsen within the next year. So let's not hope for it, but it's possible. And I think that there are two main reasons for it from my perspective. The first reason is Germany and Russia are part of a systemic conflict. Russian leadership supports authoritarian regimes, the weakening of democracy worldwide, a multipolar world order dominated by a few major powers, and in which conflicts can be resolved also by military means or used as an instrument to increase leverage. By contrast, Germany stands for an open society and for strengthening of democracy and rule of law, and it supports multilateral solutions to global and regional conflicts. The tension between these two positions will continue and grow in the coming years, I'm afraid of. Second, with the West, and that includes not just the US and the NATO, but also the EU, has become a key source of internal legitimacy for the Russian leadership. Germany, as a leading power in the EU, is no longer a partner for Moscow, but rather an opponent to be weakened. And I think this reflects a paradigm change in Russia's Germany policy. So Germany is not seen anymore as a bridge into Europe, as a partner into Europe, but it is seen as a major power. And when you want to weaken the EU and democracy, you have to weaken also Germany. I think this is also, and this is, I think, an important example. This is also a repercussion for civil society exchange and dialogue projects with Germany, which are at the core of German also foreign policy and policy towards Russia. Since 2012, Russia has developed into a fully authoritarian state with systematic internal repression of the political opposition and independent media, with systematic internal and limits on exchange with external stakeholders, particular civil society. External funding for non-governmental organizations and the media is drying up due to laws that label foreign funded organizations as foreign agents. The work of German foundations and NGOs in Russia could be made even more difficult in the coming years, and further organizations will be forced to leave the country. Civil society, cultural, academic, and youth exchange stand at the heart of the German-Russian relations. If these areas become increasingly the target of a policy that wants to cut exchange, it will have a major impact on the German-Russian relations. Another level is Russia's role in global politics, where it is increasingly involved in conflicts in the Middle East, North Africa, and also in Afghanistan, I think now. Despite Russia's growing global importance, the Russian leadership often has no interest in a solution of conflicts. Instead, it exploits these conflicts to improve its bargaining position in other areas. Russia's engagement in Syria, for instance, served, among other things, to improve its own position towards the US and the EU. The post-Soviet conflict zones in the South Caucasus, Moldova, and Ukraine are means of influencing these states. And the annexation of Crimea is an example how the Russian leadership wishes to prevent post-Soviet states from being integrated into the EU and NATO. So, looking to my second point, so what are the challenges, the balance between conflict and cooperation? I think the campaign against Germany in the connection with the poison attack on Alexei Navalny the assassination of Gangoshvili in Berlin's Tiergarten, hacker attack on the Bundestag, and a disinformation campaign in Germany show that Russian leadership is increasingly pursuing its interest even in Germany with no consideration for Germany's position. Germany's cooperative approach towards Russia, to Russia's leadership has thus reached its limits, and the concept of change through rapprochement has failed. German support for the construction of the Nord Stream gas pipeline has not made Russian leadership any more willing to compromise on other issues, such as, for instance, Donbass. So this is something which was discussed in Germany, yeah, but it did not happen. On the contrary, Moscow seems to exploit the pipeline also to increase division in the EU. So I think any German government will act in this framework, which will not give much room for improvement of the relations. Germany is on the way to rethink its policy towards Russia. And I think one key lesson from the last years is that Moscow will not adapt a more compromising approach if greater cooperation is offered. And I think there is a need to set limits when dealing with Russia without slipping into an ideological discussion or ideological criticism, I think, which can also take place. Therefore, I think my first point is in the coming years, Germany can expect a more assertive Russia. Projects that promote economic and energy interdependence with Russia will further decrease. There will be increasing discussions on the need for self-protection, investment in defense capabilities, as well as in digital security and societal resilience. So I think that's a trend we can observe already, and I think this trend will go on. Second, as Russia plays an important role in conflicts worldwide, it is essential to seek pragmatic diplomatic relations and to improve Germany's own negotiation position via greater engagement in conflicts in its neighborhood and worldwide, as well as taking more responsibility in upgrading multilateral institutions. So we might see more German engagement also within this framework. I think the discussion will grow to strengthen Germany's role in the framework of alliances like NATO and the EU and multilateral formats like OSCE. Third point is social exchange and change in Russia will stay a priority for German foreign policy. Despite the more difficult conditions, dialogue projects in the fields of academic, cultural, and youth exchange and town twinnings will be further supported by the German side, despite all the difficulties we see in this field. Furthermore, the discussion about less political areas of cooperation and common interests, such as disaster risk reduction, climate change, and green transition can be used to promote dialogue. I think this is something we will see more in the German approach. But at the same time, my impression is that the numbers of topics of common interests are declining, and the securitization of all areas in Russian domestic and foreign policy will further undermine German-Russian relations. I think nevertheless, there is an interest on the German side to find areas of cooperations despite all these difficulties. So I think I agree here with Nadia. At the moment, there's a lack of ideas also on a lack of strategic ideas what to do also with Russia and in the German-Russian relations. Yeah. So, and it's just going on this path, which has not worked in the past years. Yeah, so that's I think that's the reality in which we are at the moment. But there is an openness, yeah, for additional ideas, and maybe this shift in the government, this change in the government, gives an opportunity to open up also the discussion away from these historical approaches of Ostpolitik, which have not worked, to maybe a different reality in which we are. Yeah, and this is a different Russia. This is not the Soviet Union, and I think this is somehow an adaptation also by the German side to understand that we have to face a deal here also with a different Russia, with a different approach in the context of a changing global order. Yeah, with China growing its role, US is changing its role, and Europe is changing its role. And I think this opens up opportunities, but I see the structural challenges in which we are somehow stuck also at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much for such thought-provoking speech. And now we have time for the question from the participants, our 6 participants. No, not from, I see a hand of Sebina Fischer, but please don't forget to tell for whom this question is. Dr. Fischer, we are waiting.
Thank you very much. Thank you for 2 very thought-provoking presentations. I have 2 small comments, one to Mr. Basov. Thank you very much. I mean, I agree with you. We have this, I mean, we talked about this before, we have this exodus of expertise on Russia and also the countries of the Eastern neighborhood from the German Bundestag. And overall, these topics are less prominent in the German debate. That is all very true. I think it also has a lot to do with the fact that German politics, you know, like the politics of basically all other states as well, have become very inward looking, not least because of the corona pandemic. So, I mean, we have a general lack of interest in foreign policy issues if it's not the United States and European topics at the moment in Germany. So that's a problem. I would disagree with your second conclusion that politicians and also people in general of the younger generation in Germany do not think that Russia is part of Europe. I would disagree with that. I mean, there are the perceptions are different today from, let's say, the 1990s. But still, I would assume that the majority of politicians, but all politically active people, would see Russia as a part of Europe. So that's the comment to Mr. Basov. And Stefan and also Nadezhda, I mean, I agree that there's very little strategy on both sides at the moment with a view to to EU-Russia relations. My problem is with this, I mean, you know, this is a claim that you hear very often in the debate. And I always wonder, because if you want to have a strategy, you need a goal. I mean, you know, you have a goal, and to reach this goal, to achieve this goal, you develop a strategy. And I think this is the main problem. I mean, I think we can formulate, like Stefan and I, we could formulate a goal, like long-term goal for German policy towards Russia. And I'm sure Nadezhda could do the same for the Russian side. But then I think the goals that we would come up with are rather detached from reality. And if that is the case, then it becomes really difficult to develop strategies. And you automatically fall back to tactical thinking, which is very much what we have on both sides. So I think, I mean, if we want to discuss strategies, we need to discuss goals first. I just wanted to make that point because the call for strategy was expressed several times.
Thank you very much for your comment. Do we have any other questions?
There's one more question, Dania. I just see a hand.
Dr. Meister, do you want to add anything?
No, I just said there's another question, or there's a raised hand. I can just react to what Sabine said. There's another question. No, I agree, but I think for me, I explained why we are also somehow stuck. Yeah, so I see there really the structural challenges, and then it's a bit problematic to say we need a strategy. Yeah, if there are no partners for cooperation, then there is no cooperation. Yeah, so I think that's the reality we face. My critical point is that we are very much stuck in now, and we are very reactive in our policy. Yeah, and I think we are lacking exactly this middle term and long term vision or goal. Yeah, and I think that's something we should also I also understand how politics functions. Yeah, so you are elected for 4 years, and then at least in democratic countries, and then you just plan for 4 years. But I think that's a problem. So I think we need also to come out of this very negative perception and this very negative spiral in which we are. I think it can help to have a middle-term and long-term strategy, or at least the goal, also where to go. But I see the problems with it. But I at least would like to have a discussion sometimes, not only about now and what is all going wrong, but also where are the potentials if you look maybe more in middle term and long term. And I think definitely there are potentials in the German-Russian relations. So that's just my point.
Маша, Мария.
Да.
Во-первых, есть Дарья Шишова, которая хочет...
I would like to...
But I would like to say a few words about Sabina's comment. I fully agree with you, Sabina, that strategy in general is about goals. We cannot... we can cooperate, we can trade without any particular goal. But if we are talking about partnership, we need a final goal. I have a suspicion that both European Union and Russia and Russian leadership have these goals. But if they expose them in public, they will be so unpopular that it's better not to mention them. And it's another mark, it's another signal that our relations are very bad. I think that Borrell's triad is not about selective cooperation. It's about containment. Russia's, let's face the truth. And Russia's goal, it's not a strategic goal, but if we talk about the current policies, I think it's to split the European Union, to find our own partners who would share our position on this or that issue. So probably it's better not to expose these goals. Probably it's better to stick to what we have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I would to repeat that we have our time for question from audience after all 3 sections, not after each of them. And I suppose we should move on to one of the most topical part of our roundtable, to the first section, prospect for Russian-German economic cooperation. And our first speaker is Dr. Ekaterina Romanova, Senior Researcher of the Department of Science and Innovation, ИМЭМО.
I will check my microphone. Okay, thank you very much for invitation. It's very great in this time of the pandemic to have this format, at least combined, but anyway. So there was a lot of mentioned what is influencing the EU-Russia relations. I would come to economic sphere. Yesterday we had the Day of German Unity. And on the page of German embassy, there was an announcement where the German ambassador, Gerd Andreas von Geyer, emphasized that the need for continuous dialogue with Russia, with the Russian Federation, is in very huge need. We have kind and close interactions, he mentioned, and especially in the field of science, culture, and economy. And I think it is a good sign for both sides, and makes sense to develop this perspective. What is actually really happening in the economic sphere, and what influences these relations? I wouldn't especially mention the Nord Stream 2 as a huge topic, I think, for the next speaker and for all audience. I just sum up some other spheres, and first of all, Germany remains Russia's second most important foreign trade partner. I do not know if Maria, tables could be. Можно кого-то, да, попросить? Okay. Second slide. Thank you very much. Second, the next one. Yes. Thank you very much. Спасибо. The trade turnover in 2020 amounted for about 45 billion euros, and that was a quarter less than in the year before Corona, and the lowest level in the 10 years. But if we check the second year, the last period, 2021, we see that all prices almost doubled again, and it revitalized trade in the first half of the 2021. So it means the high dependence of Russian exports on oil and gas prices. And for example, German exports fell less sharply in 2020 than Russian deliveries to Germany. And all this means that the Russian ruble is also high dependent on fluctuations in oil prices, and practically one pays for imports with exports, and there is a problem that the ruble has depreciated so much, and that means the price, for example, for machine has doubled in local currency in rubles, and that makes it's harder to sell German products to Russian market. If you look on the structure, second slide, according to statistics, more than half is accounted for by mineral fuels such as oil, gas from the Russian side, and coal. Russia also exports agriculture chemicals and some other products with a little added value. And for Germany, delivery volume to Russia actually covers all the entire spectrum of German industry. First of all, the machines, equipment, vehicles, German premium cars in particular are still very popular in Russia, and also pharmaceuticals, the chemical products, cosmetics, and so on, and food as well. So we can remark certain dependencies, like Germany obtains more than half of its natural gas requirements of 90 billion cubic meters of natural gas from Russia. The same applies to crude oil, where Germany gets a third of its imports from Russia. Some other examples, Airbus obtains 65% of Titan deliveries from Russia. It means that titanium from Russia is required for aircraft construction in Germany. So we can see that dependencies could also grow in other areas. The main factors are actually the strengths of Russian economy. Also, what affects bilateral relations? It's a political climate we already discussed, but in the economic field, it means sanctions. The EU embargo against Russia imposed in 2014 means include financial sanctions and an arms embargo. Russia, on the other hand, issued an import ban on European food, but nevertheless, Germany continues to deliver large quantities of food to Russia, for example, confectionery, cocoa, coffee preparations. Also, German beer is very popular in Russian supermarkets. It's still available. It means that sanctions often do not mean direct delivery bans, but indirect effects, like banks have become more cautious with projects, or the financing of export transactions. The test procedures now make much longer. This applies above all to goods that fall under so-called dual-use system that could possibly also be used by military purpose. So many projects are postponed or cancelled entirely because of German investors do not know how the sanctions will continue and which industries may be affected in the future. And but all in all, many experts assess that Russian market is no longer plays a decisive role for Germany. The amount of German companies which presented since 2014 in Russia dropped from around 6,000 to 4,700 on the Russian market, and so economic and sanctions play a crucial role for this. The vast majority of German companies anyway still sticking to the Russian market, and in the course of Western sanctions policy, Russian economic policy is promoting a policy of localization and import substitution. Russia increasingly trying to replace Western industrial products with in-house production or imports from predominantly Asian countries. And the issue of localization is being followed closely by German business. For example, an over 250 million investment of made by Daimler in 20,000 passenger car plant near Moscow, and such projects also support medium-sized suppliers based on the motto "Made in Russia for Russia." We definitely see the uncertainty among investors because new rounds of sanctions can threaten at any time, but it is different with the companies that are already here. They continue to invest in their production facilities, build new logistic complexes, retail groups are moving into the regions, and we also see that construction of domestic market caused by economic crisis has led German companies to re-export to Europe. 1 minute, okay. Just call some initiatives for development of relations. In January 2019, Eastern Committee for Eastern European Association for German Business presented a new agenda for economic cooperation.
Да, привет. Ну, у меня тут сейчас.
And the agreement on German-Russian efficiency partnership was presented on the St. Petersburg International Forum. German Russia companies wanted to work more closely together in the field of digitalization, and the main goal of this initiative is to implement German best practices in the area of digitalization and innovation in the Russian economy. And last but not least, also to mention the new German initiative, German National Hydrogen Strategy, which was announced in 2020, and in 2019, the Ministry of Energy of Russia took a proactive decision to develop a roadmap for the development of hydrogen energy in Russian Federation. And we have already examples of cooperation, like Winterthur D and the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology agreed on scientific collaboration in this field. We also have rich tradition and cooperation of higher education. Okay, last sentence. In conclusion, I want to join the common opinion to no matter who is the power in Germany, both parties are interested in cooperation, but limiting factor is well-being of business climate in Russia. And let me end with a quote that can be taken as a wish. It is easy to walk down the mountain than uphill, but the view is much better from the top. Thank you.
Thank you for your analysis. And I would like to invite our honorable expert, Dr. Kirsten Westphal, head of the project Geopolitics of Energy Transformation, member of the National Hydrogen Council, senior associate, SWP.
Thank you very much, and also many thanks from my side for having me and for this interesting discussion. I will talk about specifically German and Russian energy relations, and I will make 3 points. My first point is that the energy relations have been in troubled waters already, but they are now in a perfect storm. I would say that since 2011, they have been in troubled waters with the third energy market package, with Crimea annexation, then the decarbonization policies of the European Union and the Green Deal with its carbon border adjustment mechanism, which is foreseeable, mostly affecting Russia. And now, of course, with the whole Nord Stream 2 discussion and the current gas price crisis, the perfect storm is basically here. It is really that the current energy price crisis, which is particularly a gas price crisis, adds to this difficult situation, because there is the strong perception that on the one hand, some experts say that it has been caused by Gazprom. I would say that at least Gazprom and the Kremlin are playing on that situation to pressure Nord Stream 2 into operation soon. And this will certainly cast a shadow on gas relations in the future, and is also really very much a burden for future energy relations. With regards to the government, of course, it's not yet clear whether it will be a traffic light coalition with the Social Democrats, the Greens and the Liberal Democrats, or whether it will be a so-called Jamaica coalition. But at least what is very clear, that the Green Party and the Liberal Democrats will be on board, and they have been both at least skeptical, if not very critical, on Nord Stream 2. And Nord Stream 2 is indeed a major short-term issue, because the construction is finished and the big question is around the certification process. And it's very clear that the certification process, if undertaking or as it's planned, will last over the winter. But we are facing already right now a quite tight market situation. So if the winter starts early and gets very cold, we might see really a tricky situation on the gas market. So this is why it's a sensitive situation with regard to gas supplies. What we're also seeing is that this might be a very difficult situation for the new government or the acting government, which we might see still in autumn, because we have the German-US joint statement of July in summer, where there was also a clear message towards Russia not to play on energy issues and not to use energy as a weapon. So there is already a discussion around, this gas crisis that we're seeing right now. Moreover, we have seen in the statement a realignment between the US and Germany on that matter. And we are seeing also the US preparing stricter sanctions in its NDAA, in the National Defense Authorization Act, which might come out and which has a package, at least in the Senate's proposal, for further sanctions also on the operation of Nord Stream 2. So what we're seeing is kind of, and I think Stefan also mentioned that, a further downward spiral, negative spiraling. And really, let's say, an energy security dilemma that has unfolded over the past years, and it's now accumulating, if you wish. What is very important also with regard to the Greens and the Liberal Democrats is that Ukraine will certainly play a larger role for the government, and they will look into a real realignment also with European partners. So it's very much, as the Russian colleague has said, towards containment of Russia to a certain extent, if we talk traditional energy relations. And as I said, Nord Stream 2, of course, it is in the major focus. My second point is a more general one with regard to the midterm situation. And I think if we talk energy relations there very broadly, then we will see a reconstruction, a deconstruction, and dismantling of existing ties, basically because of the energy transformation. So to put it very simple, if the EU and Germany are moving forward, and there is the big pressure now with the Greens negotiating the coalition agreement, then we will, of course, diminish the consumption of oil and also of coal imports, which will affect Russia and later and even more so natural gas as well. So what we will see is that electrification will play a bigger role. And this is why I said deconstruction, dismantling of energy ties plays a role, because we are entering here a very tricky phase as well. And I would simply highlight the point of synchronization of the Baltic grid, where we still have open questions of delinking, desynchronization of the Baltic grid with the BREL. There are almost no discussions so far, and this is really a contentious issue, and even more so if we look towards Ukraine and Moldova. So if you ask me, I have even more geopolitical headaches around the electricity issue. And the electricity issue, of course, touches on much more sensitive issues, even because you have the digitalization of the electricity sector. And there you have all the debate on hybrid threats coming in and cyber attacks from Russia that have been, well, at least notified or at least attributed to Russia. And this is why I say we have to look into really we will see more decoupling and deconstructing of the energy relations, of course. My third and final point is, what does this mean for the outlook? And the outlook is, of course, very patchy and quite open. Because even though if we have a new government in Germany, we will see, I think, still selective cooperation. Stefan has also said that, the Ostpolitik paradigm is gone. There is no idea of a change through rapprochement, and even less illusion that energy interdependence might result in some convergence or something like this. This is really, I think, a talk of the past, but still there is the idea of at least selective cooperation on certain issues that is necessary to hedge conflicting issues that I mentioned with regard to electricity issues. And there is, I think, still the view that it is necessary to look into a positive agenda, because Russia is the neighbor, it's there to stay. It is still the biggest supplier of raw materials. So it's not only energy, but we're looking into more raw material supplies when we transform on our energy system. And this results in, I think, more pragmatism and realism. And so there is really a necessity to look into, such a positive agenda. And the colleagues before have said this. We have to talk about green molecules and electrons, imports from Russia into Germany and into the EU, of hydrogen, of course, climate neutral hydrogen, like blue and turquoise hydrogen produced from natural gas, or even green hydrogen, plus also, and I wouldn't exclude that, more electricity cooperation, for example, with the idea to produce wind or electricity from wind in the Kola Peninsula and then export that basically in an island mode into the European Union and to Germany. And I think these are lighthouse projects that might help to at least stick towards some selective cooperation in energy matters. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your report. If anybody from participants have questions, Ekaterina Romanova.
I have a short comment and a question to Kirsten. Thank you for your presentation. My feeling is that despite the position of Green Party, it seems to me that Germany cannot abandon Russian gas in the coming decades, and this means that sooner or later Nord Stream 2 will be launched. At least ultimately this infrastructure can be used for supply of carbon neutral hydrogen. What do you think about? And the second question is, what do you think, what tools Germany can apply to Russia to maintain Ukrainians' position as a transit country after the expiring of treaty in 2024? Thank you.
Should I answer immediately
please.
now?
Please, Dr. Westphal.
Excellent and very, very difficult questions, to be honest. I mean, there is an if. I agree that Germany cannot easily abandon Russian gas. This really depends on the space and the depth of the energy transition. And I hope that a new government will really speed up, but it's getting more difficult right now because we really have to change the infrastructure, and it's really going to be costly because we did the easy things that we could do in the past, and now it's really going to be very challenging. So my take is as well, if we don't move forward very quickly, we will have to rely on basically Russian gas. This is a consequence, not so much as something on geopolitical stories, but it's really a question of geology and existing infrastructure. Russia is simply the major supplier, and Norway has at least limitations, and also Algeria as well. And what we're seeing right now is that LNG, for LNG, the European Union is the market of last resort, but it basically goes to Asia and best paying consumers. So it's not coming for the rescue as something from the US. Whether this might help Nord Stream 2, maybe, because I really think what is sometimes overlooked in the German discussion is the geography of both natural gas production in Russia that has moved to the north, plus European consumption as well that has moved to the north. So there is a factual point to enlarge infrastructure in the north, but we are also needing, of course, natural gas in especially southern Germany. So there is a strong wish, basically, if you look to the energy landscape, also to import via Ukraine through into Germany as well. And I think this is a major point that can be raised in negotiations, but I very much agree that it's not an easy negotiation simply. There's no remedy or no easy way forward, basically also because we want to implement the Green Deal, which means less fossil fuel gas consumption, plus the transit through Ukraine very much depends now on the consumption of Russian gas in the South European energy markets. And we have seen major changes here. First of all, because Turkstream is in operation and the links into Serbia are built. Plus, we are also seeing a lot of LNG coming into the market. So it's not just Russian gas through Turkstream that limits volumes through Ukraine, but also, the LNG that is coming into the region. So it's not an easy way forward to negotiate the new contract. And I still think if you say Nord Stream 2 as a part of an infrastructure system for hydrogen, yes, but it's very much far away into the future because Germany does not look into blending in hydrogen into the gas infrastructure, but it's really looking into importing pure hydrogen. And if you want to import pure hydrogen, you really have to build up lots of gigawatts of renewable power in order to produce enough hydrogen. For example, if you just want to fill in one string of a pipeline, we are talking really about 8 and the necessity of establishing 8 gigawatts of hydrogen electrolyzers, which is basically then needs to be double or 3 times more the capacity in renewables generation. So we're talking really about 24 gigawatts that have to be installed only for the production of hydrogen to be transported into Germany. So that would be, of course, a big way forward if Russia wants to do this big step of producing enough climate neutral hydrogen. But this is really something that I would see beyond 2030. Sorry for being so long, but this have been really very difficult questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Westphal, and I want to add my question also to questions of Dr. Romanova. In a meeting with Zelensky, Angela Merkel also noticed a prospect for Ukraine to cooperate with Germany in production and transport of hydrogen. And I was wondering, how is it technically expected to transfer hydrogen from Ukraine to Germany?
Is this
Dr.
also,
Westphal?
Is this also for me? Okay.
Yeah, sorry, it's also for you.
The same, actually the same as I said with regard to Nord Stream 2, the idea, first of all, there are many ways to transport hydrogen. It could be the derivatives of ammoniac, liquefied organic hydrogen carriers, liquefied hydrogen or methanol, for example, or e-kerosene. So this is something to be negotiated. This fluids derivatives are much easier to transport, but are more cost expensive in production, and you need, for example, CO2 as well in the production. So to answer that question, it depends what we are looking into really. But as I said, Germany really prefers pure hydrogen imports, and then it would be basically the discussion of refurbishing the gas pipes, or one of the gas pipeline strings, which is really an advantage if you look to the Ukrainian system, because we have a number of pipes, which could be, we could just choose one and then do a refurbishment or a repurposing of this pipeline. And then, as I said, you have to install a lot of renewable production capacity to produce enough hydrogen in order to have to fill the pipe and to keep the pressure. What needs to be done technically, that's not so difficult, because normally most of the existing pipes can be really repurposed. It's more an issue of the compressor stations that have to be replaced and the metering system. But the idea is that Ukraine can become part of the so-called European hydrogen backbone that is now is now planned and in planning, and there are discussions going on.
Thank you very much. And now we have our time for the question from the audience. And please, before asking, introduce yourself and notice whom are you referring to. And don't forget to turn your microphone on. So who wants to be the first one? Yeah, we see a hand of Daria Shishova in Zoom.
Yeah. Good afternoon. Do I need to take my camera to turn my camera on?
Yeah, it would be great.
Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. And dear speakers, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts on Russian-German relations and ways to strengthen them. My question is addressed to kind of all of the speakers, but if we have no time for such large comment, I'd like to ask only the representatives of German party to the discussion. So my question is, I would like you to comment briefly on the possibility of bringing Russian-German relations back to the level of early 2000s, or at least to the pre-Crimea times. Do you believe this turn point to be possible, or do, in your mind, have Russian-German relations reached the point of no return?
Daria, who wants to respond?
Maybe I respond. Kirsten has already had so many questions, and Sabina had to drop out. Yeah. I would say no. We are in a different reality. I think I already talked about it. Yeah. So I think too many things have changed since this time. And I just see the structural problems in the relationship, and you cannot just ignore what happened in between. Yeah, but I also think Russia is different now than it was in 2000, and Germany is also somehow different. Yeah, so the relations are different. So I think it's this is politics. Yeah, so things are changing, and we are in this new reality. So I think. It's more about pragmatism. It's more about accepting this reality, not talking. Yeah, you have a lot of Germans also talking all the time about the good old times, but I think this is also not fair towards Russia. Yeah, we have a different approach now from the Russian side, and a different reality, and maybe also Russian leadership sees Germany also different, sees the European Union very different. Yeah. Now and has maybe also different priorities. So I think that's the reality in which we are live, and we should face this reality and not wishful thinking or yeah. So we should not think about we should not forget about historical developments and trends and so on. But I think that's not the point at the moment. Yeah. So that's why I would say no.
Thank you very much, Dr. Meister.
I can very easily add from the energy perspective. from the energy perspective, it's simply that we won't go back to the past of the 2000s because we want to decarbonize. So anyway, there is a necessity to restructure the relationship. And here I've really said for me, it's really the big question is trust. And a lot of trust has been lost also in the energy relationship, and a lot of trust is lost actually right now with the gas crisis. And yeah, we will see how this winter goes. I think this winter will be extremely crucial for, as I said, for the future relationship, and whether we can pick on kind of lighthouse projects to build up the relationship again. But there's also, as Stefan said, and I fully agree, we from the German perspective have to be also very, very realistic and pragmatic as well. And sometimes I see the rhetorics in the German debates, both on climate issues, but also on Russia, very disconnected from actual market realities, basically ignoring the huge share of Russian gas coming into Germany and the European Union. And this is also very difficult to hedge and manage actually the relationship, which is necessary, I think.
Thank you very much, Frau Westphal.
Dr. Fischer, do you want to add anything?
I think there's Nadia, and there's also someone in the chat who asked a question. So maybe you check both.
May I add some very shortly? From the economic perspective, I think, as I already mentioned, everything depends on state of Russian investment climate. For example, in terms of trade turnover, if we have oil prices like in the beginning of 21st century, then we have more turnover. When we speak in the sphere of science and education, I think here is very important. Very important the Russian domestic policy, as it sends very contradictory signs to scientists, and from the one point we'd like to develop international cooperation. From the other point, on the other hand, we see that internal political situation do not, how to say, in English is difficult. Способствует, что-то мне выпало. Contribute to this very short political science. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. And I saw a hand of Dr. Arbatova.
You switched on. You switched off.
Now it's better. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Since I was one of the speakers, I would like to add to the question of Daria. I fully agree with Stefan. It is impossible to step into the same water twice. The situation is different. 20 years ago, we were talking about Russia's integration with European Union. Now, the situation is completely different. We're trying to avoid a big conflict, a big war in Europe. And which is why I have said that the concept of peaceful coexistence could could become a new basis for our relations. It's very sad. I'm personally very disappointed at this situation, but we should think how to avoid a big war as a result of escalation of local conflicts, escalation of contradictions and unintended incidents. So that should be the basis to avoid a big conflict in Europe. The United States is busy in Asia, and European security is becoming more and more the European cause. And I hope that in this sphere, we could find a common ground. Trust does not appear from the middle of nowhere. Trust can be built when we resolve problems together. So the situation is very bad, but it's not desperate. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Dear colleagues, dear experts, thanks very much. Zaur Mamediyarov, Department of Science Innovation, ИМЭМО. I have two short questions to the experts. First of all, is possibly to Dr. Meister. Well, Germany and Russia have a long history of cooperating in science and higher education, and just following what Dr. Romanova said, do you see the room for improvement here? I just give some numbers. Each year, more than 10,000 of Russian students study in Germany. It's third place after India and China in Germany, and it's the major direction for the Russian students from Russia, because each fifth student from Russia goes to Germany. So it seems quite a big room for soft power and improvement of relations between our countries. Do you see that? And the second short question to Dr. Westphal about the Ukraine in this energy triangle. In your opinion, is there a chance that Germany will invest in green energy in the Ukraine to maybe produce this hydrogen from Russian gas on the territory of the Ukraine? Thank you very much.
Dr. Meister, we're waiting for your answer.
Maybe I start, and I maybe take one question here from the chat also. Maybe I start with the question on higher education. I think definitely, I think that's really a basis also for, how to say, for exchange between both countries. And I think that's an area where Germany also heavily invests in this education exchange, yeah, because it's also investment in the future, in the next generation, but this is also a field which is just crucial for Germany. I just so my what I'm afraid of is that there will be, from the Russian side, more limits also in this field. Yeah, so I think this has been already mentioned somehow. So people are more careful now also with whom they cooperate. There are more questions also if you cooperate with Western countries or Western institutions. So I think from the German side, I don't see here any problem also from the EU side. So I think there will be maybe even more funding also for this kind of cooperation with Russian academics and Russian universities, yeah, because we see that this is this is really an important area, and this is not so politicized, and I think that's just crucial also for Germany soft power. But I just see on the other side more questions than answers, and I see here also not such a positive trend. Yeah, so also talking with some of the colleagues. And maybe just take the question here on how the new parliament could influence the EU common position towards Russia, the new German parliament. I think Sabine somehow mentioned this already. So I think on one hand, the EU is divided on Russia. Yeah, so and no matter what Germany is somehow on one side, but it's also somehow trying to how to say, to push some kind of cooperative or positive approach towards Russia still, despite all these problems. But I can imagine that with a green liberal coalition, there will be maybe more tension on Eastern Partnership countries. I think that was already mentioned. And I think that might so I think there will be maybe even I don't know how to say, yeah, if it's a social democratic, green, liberal, or CDU, yeah, Christian democratic, liberal, green, there might be even a division between foreign minister and chancellery also on how to deal and maybe where to focus also, if it's more Russia or if it's maybe more Eastern Partnership countries. I don't think there will be an overall change, but I can imagine there will be by the smaller parties more investment in Eastern Partnership countries, particularly in Ukraine, Georgia, and in Moldova, and this can maybe even create more frictions also with Russia. I'm not sure, but there are these people, let's say, in these parties who have this approach, yeah, and that can have an impact. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Westphal.
I very much agree to what Stefan Meister has said. I think that we will see a more normative-based approach, a normative-based approach with regard to liberal democracy, but also with regard to climate and environmental issues, both with the Greens and the Liberal Democrats. And on the question whether Germany will invest in Ukraine, yes, it's part of the joint statement between Germany and the US. Germany has committed itself to fund 175 million money into a special fund, which is dedicated to, in particular, green energy. And I suspect that hydrogen will be a share in there. And it's also, the idea is to get more funds by private companies up to 1 billion euros. And there's also the strong commitment for the phase out of coal that is supported by Germany. So I would say there has been already quite a commitment to work with Ukraine on coal issues, to work on a transit agreement beyond 2040, beyond 2024. And now there is this big fund which could be dedicated to renewables and renewable hydrogen as well. But of course, having said this, this is on paper. There are, of course, big obstacles to really implement the projects.
Thank you very much. Next question, please.
My question will be for, my name is Rustamova Lelia Rustamovna. I'm a researcher at ИМЭМО and senior lecturer at МГИМО. And I write about German soft power, and this is quite understandable why Germany is welcoming Russian students in Germany. Well, I don't want to ask a question exactly about Russian-German relations, but I want to set a question to Dr. Fischer about Eastern Partnership. If I'm not mistaken, you said that Germany is interested that Ukraine, Georgia, and Moldova would enter the European Union, or at least, if not very much interested, welcoming, for example. And how do you assess the ability to be equal partner in the European Union, equal member of the European Union, considering the economic resources, the system of values, and internal conflicts as well? Thank you.
Sorry, Dr. Fischer wrote that he had to leave us, but I would like to ask Dr. Meister to respond to this question, if it's possible.
Yes, sure, it's possible. So I think I agree with Sabine. Yeah, so there's no appetite at the moment for any new members of the EU. Yeah, and I think also these states, I think there's no support from the German, neither from the German majority of the German political elite and the German society. I don't think we will see the same way of membership we had in the past with the EU. I think the EU is changing at the moment. And I think it's also with this internal crisis we face in the EU. I'm not so sure about the full-fledged membership we had until 2007. Okay, and then later also with maybe some Balkan countries, it's also discussed. And that's the next wave. Yeah. So there's Serbia, and so we are talking here about the Balkans. But I would say I don't know what you mean with on equal level, on the same eye level. Yeah, so I think it's about, there are some principles you can join the EU. I think that's one thing. Yeah, so and if you don't fulfill these criteria, you will not join the EU. On the other hand, I can imagine this kind of different ways of integration with the EU, maybe in different areas, if it's the common market, or if it's maybe a different the energy sphere or whatever. Yeah, so I think that you can so there are different options of integration. I can imagine that there are possibilities for these three states, and then they are an equal member. Yeah, with if they fulfill the criteria, they are an equal member also like the other members. And I think I don't see here any problem. The question is maybe in future if there will be maybe a kind of a core. Or there will be, which integrates more, and then it's the question if you have a majority vote also on some issues. That's all discussed. So I think that's maybe an opportunity, but I see more renationalization at the moment. So I see less integration also in many areas. As I said, I would say there might be a partly integration of these countries, or one or two, or one of these countries in specific areas, but I don't see this full-fledged membership. And as I said, if you fulfill the criteria, you will be an equal member. Yeah. So if not, you will be not a member at all.
Thank you very much. And we have got also a question to our mail. It's a question for Ekaterina Romanova. Question of Dr. Konstantin Korneev, Senior Researcher of Institute of Far Eastern Studies, Russian Academy of Science. The question is devoted to knowledge economy in Russia and Germany. Are there some points for better cooperation and joint projects? Would you be so kind to provide concrete examples?
Yes, I really haven't for mentioned these initiatives. I will make it very briefly. In 2019, there was it was signed an agreement on German-Russian efficiency partnership, and it's a lively program to increase efficiency and productivity in Russian industry, in which the Russian state wants to support companies in the field and industrial solutions, and so on, and also further cooperation in education field, cooperation with banks, as well as the digitalization, automatization, and exactly in the last field, there is a new one agreement, or better to say, memorandum of understanding. It was signed in 2017 on the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, and it calls German-Russian Initiative for Digitalization. It's exactly about development of best practices in the area of digitalization and innovation in the Russian economy, and to increase its competitiveness. And most important partners in this field are German Trade Chamber. Okay, so thank you. German Trade Chamber is from the German side, and RSPP, how it's called in also, I don't know. Also trade committee from the Russian side, some German companies already involved, like Siemens, Saab, Volkswagen, Robert Bosch, and from Russian side also some Russian companies like telecommunication group Rostelecom, the Russian company Cifra, it's Renova Group, Kaspersky Lab, and the innovation accelerator Skolkovo. So this is a huge field of cooperation, and some projects are already started. So thank you.
Thank you. Another. Oh.
Thank you, Pavel Timofeev, ИМЭМО. My question is addressed to our German colleagues. I'm sure you have heard about the last submarine scandal between France and Australia and United States. So France declared the EU should contribute more to the European military autonomy. So I would like to ask our German colleagues, what's the German viewpoint on the European military autonomy as compared to NATO? Thank you.
Maybe I answer.
Yeah.
And Sabina is not here anymore. So I think there's not so much appetite from the German side on this autonomy approach, because we are very much linked to US policy. So in terms of our security, yeah. So I think the US and NATO are crucial for Germany, and there is an understanding that there's a need for maybe growing security cooperation among the EU and also EU members of NATO. Yeah, and we also see that there will be less US attention on Europe because the priority are the US. But Germany is not so supportive for this French approach, which I think how to say it, which is maybe it's a long-term approach for more autonomy. Let's call it like this. But I think it's just unrealistic at the moment. And the German approach is also there were these hopes with Biden to keep Biden maybe more in Europe. Yeah, then increasing maybe the independence also from the US. I think this will maybe not be realistic also. Yeah, I think the US policy is changing no matter who is president also in Washington, and the top priority is China and Asian Pacific region. Yeah, so I think that also this current decision with Australia and UK, I think made it very clear, yeah, that this is a priority without any consultations with the French side and other European partners. But I think how to say it, it's just too early, yeah, for this kind of autonomy, and it's a gradual approach, yeah, which we can now observe, and there will be more independence also, and there will be needs to be more ownership also by the Europeans and by Germany, but not with this French push and in supporting also this French approach from the German side at the moment.
Thank you very much. And we have another question.
Yeah, hello. My name is Daniela Kunisheva. I'm GIMO University. My question would also be to Dr. Meister. In your presentation, you said that you think that Russia doesn't consider Germany to be a bridge between Europe and Russia anymore, and rather consider this as an opponent and wants to somehow weaken Germany. I was wondering if you think that Germany, for its part, also doesn't consider Russia as a partner anymore, and rather as an opponent or a threat, especially if you look at the German media that predominantly portray Russia in a negative way. Therefore, don't you think that this all leads us to a very dangerous conflict spiral or enemy image spiral, where one side accuses the other of animosity towards itself and vice versa? If so, do you think there is a way out of this situation? Yeah, thank you.
Maybe I respond also here directly. So I think Germany has tried as long as possible to see Russia as a partner and offering also something to the Russian leadership. So I think it's not, I would not say that Germany is the driver here in this worsening of the relationship. But I think what happened in Ukraine, in 2014, has a major impact on the mutual perception. And also from the German side, the perception is that Russia is undermining the European security order, and the rules we have agreed after the Cold War. And there is a different threat perception now also on Russia. So this, Sabine described this. It was different after the Russian-Georgian war, and now it is really different. So you have a different security perception and a rethink also of risks which are linked to Russian action, in the neighborhood and Russian policy. And I think also Russian disinformation campaigns in Germany, hacker attacks on the Bundestag, and all this I think has a very, very negative impact on the German-Russian relations. I think it was, or maybe it's underestimated, I don't know, in Russia, but this is really again about trust, and it really alienates also the elites from Russia. And I think I think it's a very negative spiral. And as I also said, it's every year it's getting worse, and I don't know. I think at the moment it's very difficult how to stop this. I think we need a kind of a baseline to define where are common interests, and we need also discussion about cyber attacks, hacker attacks, about media, how to deal with media. I don't see that Germany is doing the same towards Russia. I don't see hacker attacks. I don't see disinformation campaigns. You can maybe criticize German media, but German media is independent. It's not acting it's not Chancellor Merkel is calling the media and then it's writing this and that. I think that's somehow different in Russia. So also what Russia today is doing and these kind of things. And I think we need to discuss these issues, because it really undermines trust, mutual trust, and there were offers also from the German side to discuss these topics, and Merkel at our last visits. So I think there is an openness from the German side to talk about this. There's no interest in further worsening the relations. So, and I hope also that somehow Russian side understands that this spiral, so they are also part of the spiral, and they also somehow need to offer something, or to at least be willing to discuss these kind of issues, which are very, very bad for our relationship.
Thank you very much. And at the end, I see a hand of Dr. Arbatova. Dr. Arbatova, please.
Thank you, Maria. I have a very short comment on Stefan's comment about EU strategic autonomy and Germany's position on this question. I think that German politicians, who in a certain sense remind me of our hawks, who do not understand the profound differences in the Euro-Atlantic relations. In my view, there is a deep crisis in Euro-Atlantic relations, which started after the end of bipolarity. And like it or not, Europe will have to ensure security in its immediate neighborhood. Americans do not want to sort out the mess in Eastern Mediterranean. We see that the US withdrawal from Afghanistan. So like it or not, there is no choice for European Union. It will have to cope with its own security. And I'm really surprised that Germany's position on this issue is so traditional. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this comment. And to sum up, I would like to ask each speaker to add something, prefer thoughts, how we can make Russian-German relation better, or what can change the situation. I suppose we can use order from our list, and to start with Nadezhda Arbatova.
Well, my position is very clear. Since the situation is so bad, we should find a new format for our interaction, not even for cooperation, but for interaction. And I think that this new format of peaceful coexistence, which consists of many sub-formats, could provide this basis for compromises and dialogues. And I would like to underline that the German politicians have very impressive past with regard to Ostpolitik of Egon Bahr and Willy Brandt. Thank you.
Thank you. Fedor Basov.
Oh, thank you. I think that we have the lack of strategy of the EU on the eastern direction of their foreign policy. So, and the ball is on the Russian side of the court. So, thank you.
Dr. Meister, we are waiting for your answer.
I think it's important to be honest with each other and to be realistic also with each other. Yeah, not just play games or whatever. Yeah, and I think sure, we have this legacy of Ostpolitik and we should not forget about it. I think there are good concepts and there were good concepts, but we should also see the reality of current German and current Russian policy and of the global order, yeah, which is changing, and also what Kirsten mentioned with energy relations, economic relations. All this is really changing, and I think it needs a kind of maybe a new more realistic approach, what is possible and what is not possible. And I think that can be a basis maybe for also improvement of the
Romanova.
I also add very briefly, as I mentioned in my report, I think the most important thing is the improvement of situation in Russian economy, the improvement of standards of living for the population, whose purchasing power will increase, and all this guarantees the stable stage of our relations and more interests of German investors in Russia, and also growing options for Russian business to be more competitive. Thank you.
Thank you. Unfortunately, our time is over, and I would like to thank all experts that you have found time in your busy schedule, and especially to thank you for your thought-provoking speeches. We're also grateful to our audience for your interest, and we hope that our roundtable provides a better understanding between our countries. And we are sure that one day definition Russenverstehe or Deutschenverstehe should change its connotation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Goodbye.